And I think that this may be a monthly series, but let's get through today first. But Ellen and Phil and I, we were brainstorming back before the holidays about a discussion on, conversations to have after the holidays related to senior living. And fortunately or unfortunately, we were unable to get that put together in a timely manner right after the holidays. And so um, I sort of proposed, let's have an open discussion on moving to senior living, and let's have the two of you just share your perspective as an aging life care manager and an operator, and let's see where the conversation goes. And I can tell by the amount of folks that have signed up for this today that I think we've hit a chord that may be interesting to a lot of folks. And so I could see us cycling through different perspectives on a monthly basis and keep this as an ongoing discussion. But so without further ado, let me welcome Phil and Ellen to the stage. And as we do, and another reminder, especially for those of you who have never been here before, the best thing about these discussions is they're live and interactive. So you can use chat, you can use Q&A, you can raise your little virtual hand and I'll open up your mic. But we want you to ask questions. We want you to share resources. And I can see we got Jan Brito there, who's another one of our positive aging community champions, who sort of took the lead as the first person to drop some info into chat. So feel free to follow suit there, folks. But what I love to do is get to know our guests before we dive into this topic. So Phil and Ellen, let's get to know the two of you a little bit better, and then we'll dive into your all's perspective on senior housing, and we'll start the conversation. And Ellen, let me start with you. You're an aging life care manager, which we'll talk more about here, but tell us, how did you get into this profession?
Well, I started about 36 years ago being a care manager. I was working in the private insurance world in catastrophic injury. But over time, I saw that there was the same need for those types of services, doing care coordination and advocacy for folks who are in kind of really bad situations or sad situations. And I felt like over time, I really wanted to change in the population that I was working with and started doing care management for seniors, mostly people who are older, or maybe they have MS or they might be younger, but they still have that same need for advocacy and care coordination. So I started a practice about 13 years ago. And we've got a great team of nurses and social workers and now educational advocates, because we're working with folks who, kids with special needs who also need advocacy in the school system. But we do focus on geriatrics.
Great, great. And I'll drop that your website into chat and make sure that it's on the recording link. Okay, now Phil, you're going to share today from an operator's perspective. Tell us how you got into this business.
Got it. And thanks for the invitation, Steve. And thanks for what you do with this community. You are, to me, the icon for positive aging, and much appreciated. So I came out of business school and was looking for something that would allow me to do a variety of things to pursue some interest. And I joined a privately owned senior living company called Meridian in Baltimore, and I just loved it. I love the disciplines I got to practice, and the people I got to meet, and the fact that this company was started by 5 men who did well and did well for others. And that kind of inspired me. So I left that corporate environment and started developing and operating adult daycare, assisted living, independent living, and memory care. And I've been doing that for 27 years now. And for the last 14, I've been the executive director and one of the owners at Springwell Senior Living Community, which is located in Northwest Baltimore, a beautiful neighborhood called Mount Washington. And we're a place that 250 residents call home, and we're a rental community with independent assisted living and memory care.
Wow, that's great. And I think both of you have great perspectives to kick off if this becomes a series, um, from your career path to where you're at now, and Phil, from somebody who has been basically, in a corporate senior living environment and healthcare environment, to now, you've got one home to manage, which is, you do a great job of that, and that this is great. Okay, all right, so let's start with Jan here. Start with Jan. I'm looking at Jan. Start with Ellen here. And Ellen, first, for those that are in the audience, and I'll drop the Aging Life Care website into chat. Tell us what, the definition of or your definition of what an aging life care manager is, and then share some scenarios about how your profession helps people in navigating the journey to senior housing.
Sure. The Aging Life Care Association is an organization where folks can get certified to do care management. And it's called the Aging Life Care Association. It was formerly the National Association of Professional Geriatric Care Managers, but they rebranded to really represent that we're working with people of all ages, all different scenarios that need some type of care management, care coordination, navigation, education, a lot of those action words where we're helping empower people to make decisions, whether it is, do I want to stay at home? Can I stay at home? Do I want to navigate to a facility? We follow people through transitions of care, and we help them figure out what they need. So we'll do an assessment, and then look at where they're struggling, look at the safety issues, see what they can do independently, see what they can't do, or what they're struggling with, or what the family's struggling with. And then we can start making recommendations, but we really want to hear what their goals are. There's a lot of different options, and it's just making sure you do it in the right way where the person is safe and supported and as independent as possible.
And one of the things over the years that I've learned about your profession is that oftentimes, like, uh there'll be, the family is concerned about the elder loved one, and they may not agree on what the best path is, and so consulting with an aging life care manager, but sometimes they'll be like, okay, we got to get mom into a senior community, and when a family like that brings you on board, um they sometimes think that they're paying you, so it's that they're the client, but mom is the client, correct? Like, that's
Correct.
what you're focused on.
It is. The person that's receiving the services is the client. So we're looking at what's in their best interest. We're not paid referral fees by anybody that we send them to and connect them with, but our job is to look at the scenario, and it may take into consideration that what we call the care village, the family and people around them, they're helping to support them, but they are the client, and we're looking at what's in the best interest of them. And we're looking at a lot of things like the least restrictive environment. We're looking to see what the finances are, and is it a sustainable plan? Because we need it to be sustainable in terms of finances, in terms of the help and support that family can or cannot give. So we take a lot of factors into consideration, and it's really a holistic picture of what's going on with that person. And then a lot of it is a matter of just educating on what options are available and what are the difference between those options and why you might pick one over another.
Great. All right. Let's jump back over to Phil, and then I think we're going to have a lot of ammunition that we can utilize for conversation. But Phil, like, one of my thoughts on you sharing today is sort of from an operator's perspective. What does the journey look like? When somebody rolls up for the first time and they're touring a community, to when they eventually move in, And I'm curious too about some of the behind the scenes things that we may not be aware of, but I'll kind of leave it at that and let you kind of take that wherever you'd like to.
Sure. Well, it starts with an inquiry, right? And sometimes it takes courage on the part of the family or the resident just to pick up the phone or submit a website form to us. And typically, we love working with aging life care managers like Ellen. They help navigate this whole process for the family, for the resident. Where that's not available, it's typically our salespeople, sales team, who are surrogates in that role. And they try to get to know, in a similar fashion, they try to get to know the person, their goals, their needs, and the family dynamics as well. But we also realize there's some obstacles to overcome. Um, there's the emotional ones, the attachment to the current home. Sometimes contemplating this move is an acknowledgement of waning independence. And even for some, it's perhaps a little bit of a social anxiety about potentially being the new kid on the block in a place when they've been more isolated the last few years prior to making a move. There's the physical and mental aspects of it. The thought of downsizing is just exhausting to some people. The task of figuring out which senior living community is the right fit takes a lot of research and list making and priority setting, that kind of stuff. And the logistics of a move, that's a whole subset of this industry, people that can help with those moves. And then there's, the practical financial matter. This is not an inexpensive proposition. For some adult children who are helping the parent move, they need to delve deeply into their parents' finances for the first time, which can be a little uncomfortable. And the customer needs to figure out the whole wide range of financial models that are out there, buy-in versus rental, CCRC versus standalone community like Springwell. So our sales team helps them walk through that and come up with strategies to address that. Just a quick note, Steve, looking at our sales data from last year, the median time from that initial inquiry, phone call, website form, et cetera, from that inquiry to move in, where a move in occurred, was 4 months. But the range was 7 days to 7 years.
Wow.
So,
That's really interesting data. I think the last time somebody shared anything with me, and I don't even know where they got their data, I'm glad that that's real data from your community, was that on average it takes 31 months, but that's really interesting information. And obviously, you could probably break that down to your independent living,
yeah,
your
yeah,
assisted living, and your memory care. And we all would know that assisted and memory care would have a tighter window.
right.
Yeah, but that's really interesting. Any insights on and this could be anecdotal, but how often do people, and Ellen, jump in on this too, is it like when you're working with somebody, how many times do they go back and visit the community that they ultimately move into?
I have some stats at my fingertips. I know that we averaged about 45 inquiries per month last year. A third of them toured, so 2/3 of them never even came by. Which is fine. And then of those that toured, 1/3 of those moved in. So of those 540 inquiries we got last year, 10% of them moved in.
Mm-hmm.
That's a result of 1/3 touring and 1/3 of those actually moving into Springwell.
Ellen, like when now, as an aging life care manager, do you sometimes, take the families out and tour with them, or like what does that look like with the clients that you help with these types of decisions?
Yeah, so the clients that we help they're all across the board in terms of what their needs are. So not all of them are going to be going to a facility or some type of community, but the ones that do, I'm always promoting for them to be proactive, to go visit multiple locations and maybe even multiple times, especially if you're particularly interested in location. Really get a sense of the community, ask to stay for an activity or go for lunch. And really get a flair for what the community is like, because it is, you're picking, you don't just look at a car and pick it. You're going to drive it, you're going to kick the tires. So you need to do that with a facility too, because this is where you're going to be residing. And I kind of likened it to the college search that I did with my kids not long ago. If the academics are good, then what do you want? Big school, Division I sports, those kinds of things. It's the same thing with the facility. If the care is good, then there is that personality piece. Can they take your dog? Do you like lots of activities? Do you like a big location where there's lots of people to meet, or do you like a small, more intimate kind of setting? So there's a lot of personality matches that you need to do when you're looking at facility placement. But I always promote for them to go in person, look at it, and compare apples to apples, because the payment models are different with different facilities. So you need to make sure you're looking at the same thing or comparing it the same way in your mind. But go check it out and look. And I do have people that kind of drag it out and they're not sure and they think, well, I'm not ready for it yet, but at least they know when time comes,
Yeah.
because we don't want them to make a knee-jerk reaction at a time of a crisis and make a really poor choice.
Yeah. Now, I knew this was going to happen. Questions are coming in fast and furious, which is great. And I think if we start addressing some of these, then for both of you, just feel free to jump in with additional anecdotes that you think that might be helpful. Before I read one of these, as you all were talking about the touring, I don't know if this will help the folks that are listening, but one of the things that I always tell folks is pretend that it's not a senior living or an older adult's home that you're looking at. Pretend that you're touring a college. And I always remind them that college kids that tour the campuses, they don't care about the square footage of their dorm room. They're looking at the community. They're looking at the other students. They're looking at the faculty. And that can oftentimes sort of take some of the stress that I can't believe that I'm looking at a senior living community. Okay, let me address Burkes' question here. She says, how can I be sure that what I pick today won't radically change tomorrow? In particular, are some of the types of housing not vulnerable to buyouts and private equity firms? Your general comments on this concern would be appreciated. I love that question, Brooke. I mean, it's a concern that we all have, whether we're moving to a community or joining a health club, but Phil, you probably have some insight on this and Brooke's question.
Yeah, I think it is a good question. I think buyouts have been more prevalent the last 10 years in the nursing home part of the industry, which I'm less familiar with at this time. But part of the reason I came to this business was because the nursing home company I work for got bought out. But I would say find out about the ownership. Have they been around for a while? Are they fully vested in the community? I think that's a good sign versus are they owned by a hedge fund who bought them 2 years ago? And there's a difference between ownership and management, oftentimes. So I think that could be telling. I would also say, look at the residency agreement, because if it changes and it changes for the worse, how do you get out? Springwell offers no questions asked, 60 days notice, or less if you need a higher level of care that we can't provide. Nobody wants to move twice, but that does give you somewhat of another option if that happened.
And boy, there's a couple of things I want to make sure that I follow up with you on there, Phil. But actually, something that you said about your agreement is a great. I'm going to drop in the question that we got from Wendy before we even. She emailed this before the discussion, and she says, "My friend and her mother were taken by surprise by the add-on fees to her mother's monthly basic assisted living costs. The amount was thousands. How transparent are most communities about these add-on fees, and are they clearly explained in the contract?" I think you sort of shared that people can get out, but how should Wendy and her friend sort of think about uh, the add-ons?
Yes, I think that does happen when you get unpleasant surprises. It does happen in assisted living more than other niches in our business. And the potential for it, I think, varies by provider, as does the transparency by provider. I would say check the website, what they say about fees. Ask the salesperson you're working with. Ours are very transparent. And review the residency agreement. All those ancillary charges should be laid out in there. And the ones I would say you look for the most in assisted living, levels of care. Typically, assisted living is priced as kind of a base fee. And then as your needs increase, there could be an a la carte charge for things like escorting, additional bathing, or that type of thing. So levels of care is a big one. Med management is sometimes incorporated into the levels of care like ours, but in some places they'll charge separately for med management. And I don't know many people in assisted living that can manage their own medications. The other one that can add up is room service. If you're not able to go down to the dining room, which is a great social aspect of community life, what are the charges for room service? But I would say at our community, the base fee that you see is the base monthly fee covers 60% of our residents. The other 40% pay a level of care charge because their needs require it.
Okay, this is great. Now,
And I can add one other thing that you
yeah,
would,
no, yeah, go ahead, Ellen.
I was gonna say another thing that often comes up in terms of additional fees is whether they need more care or two-person assist, or whether they have incontinence. So they would need incontinence supplies coming in, and that's usually a separate charge as well. So
And
I often encourage people just to ask.
and Ellen, so Wendy's got this, Wendy shared this concern that her friend had, her loved one had. When people are working with an aging life care manager, I so let's say that you help a family move into a community, and what are some of the ongoing relationships that you have? Like, what's a typical ongoing relationship? I imagine some of your clients is like, okay, Ellen, thanks for helping us find the place. We know where you're at. But then other folks, do they have an ongoing relationship? And would a question like this be one where you might come in and help the family resolve their concerns with the provider?
Right. After somebody is actually transitioned and moved into a facility, we like to follow up just to make sure that the care plan reflects their care needs and that there aren't any gaps. So we may do some follow-up visits after they move in. And then families can decide if they want us to continue to follow up going forward. And we figure out what kind of cadence that is. If somebody's stable, they're doing well, their care needs are met, we can spread out our visits. Maybe we go once a month and just check in on them, make sure they've got everything they need, or bring them some toiletries or ancillary items that they would need from the store and just can't get out. But we do talk to nursing. We see if there's been any changes in medication, if their status is changing in any way, shape, or form, and we feel like it's not being addressed in the care plan, then we would ask for a follow-up care plan meeting to make sure that that's just changed. And that's the vehicle that communicates the care needs to all of the staff, whether it's daytime, nighttime, weekend, they're using that care plan. So, we often follow up, and many times they're solo agers, so they don't have people who are checking in on them. And a lot of times the adult children are out of town, or they're just busy with their own lives and kids and jobs that they can't get there as frequently as they would like. And when they go, they're visiting as opposed to checking in with nursing, or they might be going after hours and they can't get the information that they need. So we may do those visits in between and let the family who's across the country know what's going on pretty live time.
Yeah, and you bring up another point that when I'm talking with families about these decisions, I often, again, comparing this to school, it's sort of like, when mom is moving to a community, think about it like when your kids were growing up, you joined the PTA, you got to know the staff and the families. And so, Phil, do you find that you have families that are sort of engaged in the community at large, and does that help the overall community and help mom and dad's experience?
Oh, definitely. We really encourage family involvement. In fact, tomorrow night we're having a luau for about 250 people, including the friends and family of our assisted living and memory care residents. And yeah, that's just an opportunity to enjoy some fellowship, to enjoy some great food, and for the families, not to be in that kind of caregiving mode, just having a good time and getting to know the managers and the dining staff and that kind of thing.
And the other families too. I
And the
mean,
other
just
families.
like when you go to a PTA meeting, we're all in the same boat, and the more supportive. But one of the things why I wanted to bring that up is that because Ellen sort of talked about solo agers, and how uh our families and our lives, or we've outlived everybody in our family, and we might not have those regular visitors. The fact that other families and community members are coming in there and engaging at large with the community is a benefit. But that to me is a great reason to be working with an aging life care manager, because if you don't have those regular visitors, at least there's somebody who's looking out and advocating for your best interest. Um, and and Phil, and Ellen, do you find that like the operators, they enjoy the fact that you've got some of their clients have aging life care managers, or are there any operators out there that sort of feel threatened that this person is there?
No, we love working with aging life care managers. I mean, your ultimate goal is to get to know the resident and help them thrive to the greatest extent possible. And if there's an aging life care manager in place, they can help kind of reveal this potential resident to you and what their needs are. So um, I can't imagine being threatened or discouraging aging life care managers in a community.
Cool. Okay, good. All right. We got a pile of questions, so I'm going to start going through these, and you all just jump in. Okay. Is there help selling and moving when you're making a decision like this? And to the person that asked that question, I see that we've got some move managers and realtors in the audience who've introduced themselves. Obviously that's helpful, but Ellen and Phil, like, any thoughts on the selling and moving when somebody is making a decision to make a move?
Yeah, that's part of the picture for us. I mean, we're looking holistically what this person needs to get from point A to point B. So we may not do the move management, but we certainly have a network of move managers that we can refer to. And same, I mean, we're at the hub of the wheel, and there's all these spokes on the wheel, whether it's an assisted living, it's an elder law attorney so they can get their documents in place, whether it's Meals on Wheels to come in the home. We, again, just look at them individually, see what they need. And if the decision is to move to facility X, then we need to look at all the things that have to happen in order for them to move there. So we can help coordinate it. We sort of quarterback some of those decisions and just the process and the logistics of getting from point A to point B, because it can be overwhelming.
And I would say on the selling of your home part, Steve, it's just kind of get to know a good local real estate broker. There used to be a senior living designation.
There still is, and I'm
Okay.
going to drop, I just dropped in the link to the senior move managers, and then there's a couple of different real estate designations that I'll drop those in as well.
Right.
Okay. Phil, I'm not sure if you've got this on your data radar, but on average, what is the age of someone starting to look for senior living that is healthy and living independently? Do you have any data on the age?
I have ours, and we do, that would probably be an independent living prospect. And the age they start inquiring is right around 80 on median, but it does vary pro and con. We have people from their 60s to 100 living in independent living.
Yeah, and I've often heard, because I've heard this question at conferences and individually that, 85 is this sort of average, age, and I've had people that have, toured in their mid 70s and sometimes really felt like this is not necessarily my cohort that's here. And but again, remember, folks, age is just a number. It's one of those things. Okay. Opinions on nonprofit versus for-profit life plan communities. I know neither one of you are working for a life plan community, but any sort of insights on the for-profit versus nonprofit world?
I could say in the CCRC world, the continuing care retirement community, the nonprofit usually has a philanthropic entity. So if somebody runs out of assets, they can still stay there. That's the big draw for that. But it really is, again, about the care. It's about the, who runs it, who operates it. And, important to ask those questions when you tour those facilities as well.
In terms of operator quality, I think that's a good point, Ellen. In terms of operator quality, though, I just would not make the mistake of saying not for profit good, for profit bad. I just don't think that is an indication of quality necessarily.
Yeah, and Phil, you brought it up earlier on who to talk to, and what I've found is that the executive director of whether it's a multi-operator chain, a single operator, a nonprofit or for-profit, that executive director, the leader of that organization, if you can get some time with them, you'll really understand sort of the philosophy, and it goes right down to the person that is taking care of your mom and dad, or taking care of you. So yeah, just do the research, folks. But great question. Joan asks, what legal clauses should be put in place to incur reimbursements of unused fees? Okay. And I knew we were going to get in the weeds today, and I want to make sure that, Phil and Ellen, if we can't answer a question, we'll do the best to research it. And Joan, you can email me. But out of curiosity, I mean, this would apply more to a community with a large entry fee, I believe. But Phil, do you have any insights on that?
My experience managing CCRCs is a little dated, but I would read through the termination clauses in the residency agreement. I know even with ours, there are some cases where a refund is owed, and it's kind of spelled out what happens in terms of inspecting the apartment after the move out and how many days to refund the amount of money that's owed.
Yeah, And another thing, early on that in the discussion, Phil, you talked about your agreement at your place is sort of, if you want to move out, it's at will or what have you. I think one thing that the shifting in perspective, and it's hard to do, but it's, when we rent an apartment, we don't feel like that is our last, I can't leave here. When the lease is up, or if you want to terminate the lease early and move to a different apartment, you move to a different apartment. As we go through life, you live in a neighborhood, maybe you own the home, you decide to move, you sell your home and you move. And I think one of the things that I'm often reminding people when I'm talking to them is that if where you move doesn't work out, it doesn't, just because you're making a change, you're moving in your 80s, doesn't mean that you can't leave and go somewhere else. And we saw a lot of that in the pandemic, where people were moving back with their kids, in some cases. Okay. All right. Now I'm gonna Larticia, I see you. Now I'm going to go through chat here, and we got a bunch of questions here. These are great questions, by the way, folks, and I really appreciate it. Okay, let's see. Kitty asks, what percentage are moving themselves and who don't have a situation that is forcing the move? Okay, I'm kind of reading between the lines with Kitty's comment is that sort of, I mean, maybe an example of this would be somebody who has severe memory impairment and they didn't want to move, but now it's a safety and risk proposition. But do you all want to comment on on Kitty's question?
Go ahead, Ellen.
Well, a lot of times I see people who are delaying, and maybe sometimes it's the inevitable of moving into a facility. People can stay at home for a really long time, but there does get to be a point, if there aren't supports available, that they really, for safety reasons, need to move. And I often get the call when there's a crisis. It's hanging by a thread, or the adult daughter is like, I'm out of town, and mom's being found out in the street, and we just can't, we can't do this. So it is, again, I'd rather people make the decisions when they can and have their location selected, and we're being more proactive. But often we get a call when there's a time of crisis and they just need to move in, and we can help with that transition.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's more prevalent with assisted living and memory care. With independent living, which is a little longer gestation period from inquiry to move in, I would say, they're really making a choice for a different kind of lifestyle to move into a community where there's some tremendous benefits of making that move, where there's the benefits of socialization, where even if they've been a loner, we see people eventually blossom into, even if they're quiet, they are enjoying the relationships with staff, other residents, and even other families. There's more going on than in their home, let's say in rural Virginia, where their day consisted of watching TV in isolation and eating a tuna fish sandwich. They're in a better, more engaging place. And also for those in assisted living and memory care, there's those physical and mental benefits from nursing oversight, medication management, dietitians, a physician on site, such that we believe that life is better and leads to a longer life with more independence for a longer period of time because of the support around them.
I've had that scenario when people move into a facility after hemming and hawing and really thinking about it for a long time, and they move in, and suddenly their world opens up because there's people to do things with, and they're feeling freed from the burden of How do I get to the store? How do I make my lunch? It's really overwhelming to cook for one, things like that. And Phil, how many times have you heard, why didn't I do this sooner?
I know, and you want to say, we told you.
Yeah. Well, and actually, like one thing that I've had a few families that I've talked with is that a lot of times this precipitates a concern because the family needs to travel to go to a wedding or somewhere abroad, and there's there and so now, Phil, in your community, are there short-term uh apartments available? Because what I've seen, like I'm thinking of one family in general that went on vacation, found a place that would take mom for a couple of weeks. Once mom got in there with the low risk of, hey, this is temporary, she fell in love with the place. Is that something that you do at Springwell? And then Ellen, have you had success with that with any of the families you've worked with?
We've done that a respite stay in the past, Steve. It's sometimes it's census driven. If you're running a high census, you really don't have those kind of residences available. And that's kind of where we are now. What we are still offering, though, is a kind of a post-surgical respite stay and assisted living for our independent living residents at a discounted rate. And those have been real successful.
That's
Yeah.
great.
And with us, it's a great place for care management. If somebody's staying at home and family has to go out of town, we can coordinate care coming in. We can do more frequent visits during the time that family's gone. And we do coordinate respite at places like Springwell if they have availability to take a person if it's more extended period of time.
But it's also another, like, I mean, I was sort of bringing this up as terms of a test drive for assisted living, but again, another reason for folks to think about a care manager might be you're coordinating care for mom or dad or a loved one. We're going out of town. Let's work with a care manager to coordinate it in her home or our home while we're gone, Okay, let's see. All right. Latarsha says, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly. What are the ages of older adults you consider to be seniors? Do you take in consideration of people with disabilities of different ages? And do you accept government funding for the clients? And just a reminder to Latarsha and everybody, next week we've got this discussion on affordable housing systems for older adults. But Phil and Ellen, are there age restrictions at your community, Phil, and what are they?
There are at some communities, ours are pretty low, that you have to be 50 years old or older. And we see, in terms of payment sources, we see long-term care insurance paying more and more, particularly for assisted living and memory care residents, although it can also apply to home care for independent living residents. But unfortunately, with our business model, we can't accept Medicaid or vouchers because they're just so much lower than our regular rates.
Yeah, and that's folks, unfortunately, Medicaid, yes, there are some states that have waivers, but the lists are tremendously long. And it's one of the unfortunate things about our system. And I know we're going to dive into that more next week. But okay, and then Phil, your community is in Baltimore. That was a question there. Are you affiliated with others, or you're a standalone community? Are you a member of any national trade associations?
We are. We're a member of locally Lifespan, which is a great organization for senior providers, and nationally Argentum, which is a National Association of Independent and Assisted Living, I think some nursing homes. But we are a standalone community, locally owned, locally operated. We are partner with LifeBridge Health, which has been a great resource to us. But our residents, have the choice to use any providers they want at any time.
Okay, great. All right, now I'm looking at the clock. We got about 10 minutes to the top of the hour. We got a pile of questions that we're going to get through here, folks. Hopefully we'll do it, but the two of you, can you hang on for a few minutes if we go over an hour?
Sure.
And I want to remind everybody this is recorded. Okay. Um, sorry, I lost my track here. Uh, okay, uniform disclosure statement is a great resource for understanding additional services for what they're charged for. Okay. Let's see. I have a friend who makes a point of looking at the library as a way of seeing what folks are interested in. Oh, this is a great one. When you go tour a community, looking in the library. That I've never heard that suggestion. Now, Phil, this, I hope that I'm not overstepping my bounds, but when I talk to people, I have them give marketing. I say, make a list of all the things that you're interested in or were interested in. And when you go and give that to your marketing person at the community, and perhaps they can introduce you to some other residents that live there that have similar interests. Is that something that, like, if I did that with your team, that they would be able to respond to?
Well, I think that's a great tip, Steve, and our sales folks would love that.
Okay. Yeah. Also, the other thing, folks, is Ellen brought it up, is your personal village. Like if you come into a community or even a home care setting with what are your interests, your likes and dislikes, and a list of your personal network, you're just giving your provider just more things that they can expand to make your life that much better. Reaching out to your church, reaching out to your neighbors that you're connected to. Okay.
Steve, I've had people who've moved into facilities who end up, they have a particular interest, but there was never a club for that, but they created their own club, or they used a strength or something that interested them and found like people within the facility to join in. And, it's a way of making friends quickly.
Okay. Linda says, can you speak to the difference between a life plan CCRC, independent and assisted living? Can Medicaid be used at a high-end assisted living? And she says, I have severe food allergies. I've not been able to find a community that can accommodate. Any thoughts on this? Well, here, and what I'm going to do, Linda, to save Phil and Ellen, because I talk about these differences for the last 35 years. I'm going to do a quick overview of all the different levels of care really quick for everybody. So start off, you've got active adult communities. These are more real estate rental communities that have a lot of clubs, but they don't have a lot of healthcare. Then the next level is independent living, which is primarily rental arrangements. And independent living can be HUD subsidized independent living for seniors on up to sort of like living in a hotel around the clock. Okay. And then the next level of care from there is assisted living, which is designed for folks that aren't capable of living independent, but don't need the level of care in a nursing home. Assisted living also has a subcategory of memory care, because as we know, you could be healthy as a horse, you could be running marathons, not needing skilled nursing care, but have dementia, and that segment is helpful. Then you've got the nursing home. So you got active adult, independent, assisted, nursing, memory care. Skilled nursing has changed radically in the last several decades, where we call it long-term care, but nursing homes are primarily short-term care. Most of us go to a nursing home for a short stay rehabilitation, and then we're discharged. And then the life plan community, or the CCRC, takes independent, assisted, and nursing, puts it all together on one campus. The concept is an individual can be independent and cared for through their lifetime. This is the confusing category, and I promise we'll do another discussion on it, that has entry fees, and it can be confusing to navigate. So hopefully I did that justice, Ellen and Phil, but jump in on any additional insights that you feel that Linda might be helpful with Linda.
Yeah, I thought you did a great job, Steve. The only thing I would add is that you're probably going to have difficulty placing an assisted living with Medicaid, but you're more likely to have it with kind of the small mom and pop operator that will accept a Medicaid waiver payment.
Or also, and I'm glad you brought that up, because assisted living specifically comes in all different shapes and sizes. Larger communities, with, anywhere from 30 to 100 residents. But then in most of our communities, there are these small residential assisted livings that might have 3 to 8 or 9 residents, and it's in a residential home. And Phil, you're right. Even if a Medicaid waiver is not available, those operators might have a little bit more latitude in creating an affordable environment for you or your loved one. Now let's talk about, I can't believe we haven't had a question on dining yet, but Linda says, I have severe food allergies and not been able to find a community that can accommodate. Is this something that the two of you have encountered, and what are some solutions?
Ellen?
So we've had scenarios where there are allergies or maybe a kosher requirement, and the facility, more of the smaller ones, would actually work with them and have it either catered in specifically for that person.
Yeah, we deal particularly in assisted living and memory care with a lot of restricted diets and food allergies. In assisted living, typically there is a nutritionist that contracts with the community as well to meet with residents that have special issues with diet.
And that's done before they actually move in. So it's kind of known entity.
And okay, Linda's asking, Ellen, do you work with clients in the Northeast? What is the region that your practices in?
So my footprint is Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, in the southeastern corner from Harrisburg to Philly, and DC. So Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, DC. Through our national organization, which is aginglifecare.org, you can find somebody like me with my certifications anywhere across the country, practically. So you can go on there and put in your zip code and find somebody in the area. And it's really good to do that, because you know that those people know the local resources really well.
Yeah, and I dropped this link in for Aging Life Care, but at the upper right-hand corner, you can find an Aging Life Care expert, and they've got a search tool there. And then what I've also seen over the years is, like, if you're listening to this webinar and you really get a positive vibe from Ellen, and you can reach out to her practice and just say, hey, I'm looking for somebody in Boston. Do you have any colleagues that I might start with? That birds of a feather flock together. Okay, and then another question for Ellen. I got to get back up there. Oh, come on. They were wondering what percentage, Ellen, I don't know if you have this handy or if you can do it anecdotal, of your clients are in their own home versus in a senior living community. Do you have sort of a breakdown of your practice?
If I had to give a guesstimate, I'm going to say 30% in a community. The rest are at home or with family or other living arrangements. It doesn't matter to us where they live, and we follow them through transitions of care. So whether they're at home or at Springwell, if they end up at the emergency room, we can be there. We can help keep them connected with their physicians in the community. It really is a very individualized process.
And And folks, it's the top of the hour. Some of you might have to jump off. This is recorded. You can go back to proaging.com and listen to the rest of it. Let's, if you guys can hang on for a few more minutes, we'll get through some of these questions. We've talked a little bit about solo agers, but Linda was wondering, is it a good idea to keep a care manager for solo agers for safety? Are you finding that this is something that you're seeing in your client practice where perhaps solo agers are reaching out to you while they're healthy and active and developing a relationship for the future?
Yes, I'm seeing much more of that. I would say even the last 5 years where they may be active, they may be working, living at home, driving, traveling, doing whatever they want to do, but they want me in their back pocket if something should happen. So if they have some type of medical event that's like unexpected, they can just call me and we hop right in. And so we usually stay in touch every 6 months or so in those scenarios. And in some cases, we have become the power of attorney because they just don't have somebody and they want somebody that they can trust to be able to be available for them if something should happen.
Okay. And Burke is asking, how difficult is it to go directly from your private residence to a more advanced level of care? For example, if you've got dementia, how difficult is it to get a spot if you have not entered at a lower level of care? And one of the things, like at Phil's place, Springwell, there's multiple levels of care, but there's also standalone memory care communities. But I'd love for both of you to comment on this. Ellen, for those folks that are kind of not resisting a move till they need dementia, if you found that, now they need it and you're kind of scrambling around, or what does it look like?
So when you're talking about the continuing care retirement communities, often you need to come in when you're a little more independent. And so that's where you may see the biggest hurdle. But people are looking for different levels of care all the time. And Springwell would be able to take people right into memory care. It becomes more of an issue of whether or not there's space available. They can come into independent, they can come to assisted, they can come into memory care in a rental community. So it really is about availability, and you of course have to often be seen by your primary care physician, have either a TB test to rule out tuberculosis, things like that. But none of it's impossible. It can be done.
Yeah, I'd agree with Ellen on that. And one thing I'd point out is, since I don't know, maybe a year or so ago when we felt like the pandemic was mostly behind us, occupancies have grown a fair amount. So it does make sense to start shopping early, get on a waiting list because, you have a higher chance of having something available when you need it if you start early.
And you can always turn it down and stay on the waiting list. People don't realize that. You don't lose your spot if you turn it down.
Great. And then I love this. Ruth shares a great quote, and she says, when in doubt about whether or when to give up one's current lifestyle and move to a senior living community, a good thing to remember is everything is all right until it isn't. And I think I'm going to do a social media post on that, Ruth. I've never heard anybody articulate it quite that way. And Linda, so I promise folks we're getting through these, but Linda asks, how long are the waiting lists? Like Phil, I know it changes, but in general, in your community, like when you're running a waiting list, what does that look like? And I guess oftentimes it could be a waiting list for a specific unit, like you want a 2-bedroom versus a studio that might be available today.
That's right. Yeah, that's really hitting it, Steve. I mean, we have, you could walk right in now and, excuse me, if you assessed, probably get an assisted living studio or a memory care studio. If you wanted a 2-room suite for either of those, you'd be out of luck and have to shop elsewhere, or you'd have to accept a residence that's not exactly what you want. But we talked about earlier, it's not necessarily the size of the dorm room you're living in, it's the other things that are happening around it.
Yeah.
So our wait list, it depends on the unit type and the product line. Right now, they're probably from 0 months to 18 months.
Okay. Man, there's some good questions here. Thank you for hanging on. Ruth asks, how are you at accommodating low vision persons? And I know, we're talking to Phil in general, but I think folks, you can, the philosophies of Phil's community are being espoused at other communities if you're not in the Baltimore area. But for Phil, in your community, people with low vision and hearing loss.
Yes, we can accommodate that. I'm not an expert in either of those things, but we do have partners in care, eye health doctors, as well as audiologists that work with a fair number of our residents. Or you can bring the practitioner that you've been working with for years to stay with you and to advise our team on how to accommodate you.
Okay, and now I'm glad we brought up healthcare because Sharon asks, does your community have residents in Medicare Advantage plans? Are you challenged by administering those plans, those healthcare insurance plans? Any inside baseball on that, Phil?
For us, the answer is no, it's not a big challenge because we're all private pay or long-term care insurance. However, our partners in care, these are providers that we've screened who we think are outstanding in their specialty and work really well with older adults. They process the payment for things like dermatology visits, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and those kind of things. So it's not a burden to us. We hire the right partners in care who can process that without problem.
Okay, and let's do a few more and then we'll put a fork in this for today. But Alice brings up a really good point. How often is a series of falls the impetus to a move? Ellen, I think both of you could probably comment on this, but Ellen, like if 60% of your clients are living at home, and they have multiple falls, is that an impetus?
Often it is. We're looking at safety. Families are concerned because if they're not there and somebody's falling. But as a care manager, I would say, well, let's see if we can find out the root of the falls first. Maybe it's a medication interaction. Maybe they need some physical therapy to work on gait and balance. I mean, there are things that we can do. We wouldn't say, oh, just because they fell, they have to go to a community somewhere. So it really is looking at what's underlying the falls. If they're frequently and all of a sudden, there might be something medical going on that we need to address.
Okay, I'm going to do two more and then we're going to be done. And I promise we're going to make this an ongoing series. There's just too many great questions. And I think this topic, we can have a revolving panel of people with different insights on making a move. Many are in the audience right now, I think. But Renee, this is a good question from Renee. Is it possible to move into a place with your piano, or do some residents have shared music rooms? Has anybody brought their piano into their own apartment at your place, Phil? And then I imagine, answer this question, and then I want to talk about something really cool that you started there at Springwell.
Sure. Yeah, we have had residents move pianos into it's one of our larger units just to have space for it. They could also use common area pianos that we would make available to them. Or Steve, maybe you were alluding to, they could do a duo with one of our musicians in residence.
Yeah, talk to the folks real quickly because I think this is a brilliant program that you have been offering there for several years, where you have students studying music living in the community.
Yeah, so we were the first in Baltimore. It was a copied idea from somebody in California that I happened to see a news article on. We partnered with the Peabody Institute at Johns Hopkins to offer free housing for them while they went to school at Peabody in exchange for rehearsing in our public areas, doing a performance a few times a month, and bringing in their classmates to play for the residents. And that's great entertainment. The cooler thing even is the intergenerational relationships that form between the residents and the musician.
Yeah, I think I met this artist that I'm sharing on the screen, and what a great program. And they have an agreement with you. They practice at regular times so that the residents can see them, and then they do a monthly performance or something like that as well. What a brilliant, innovative program. Okay. I'm making this the last one because there's no telling how long it's going to take for you to answer this. But it's thoughts on the future. Will there be fewer staff but more prospective residents via the baby boomers growing older? I think we're already reading about this in the news that, the challenges with staffing. I'd be curious on both of your all's perspectives and some of the creative approaches that you've used or that you envision using to address the potential challenges in the future.
I mean, for me, I think healthcare is a people-intensive business, and you're never going to separate it entirely from, having to hire and manage and retain quality people who really care for the resident. At the same time, you kind of look into the technologies that are available as things come out. And, I wouldn't say we're a technology leader in that respect. We do have robots in the dining room helping our servers deliver trays, which is kind of entertaining to the residents and, leverages our staff a little bit. We are, for the first time this year, exploring some movement monitoring in the resident apartments, particularly in memory care, to try and help us diagnose changes in behavior and sleep patterns. But I'm sure there's a lot more out there than we're doing.
Yeah, but those are two just really several innovative ideas that I'm curious to see how they develop. And then Ellen, any of your thoughts or observations on current or future staffing challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Phil. There's a shortage, even in care management, but especially with caregivers in facilities and home care companies. Telehealth does alleviate a little bit, even just taking vitals and things like that, tracking information, doing telehealth. But we're working a lot with workforce development, really trying to get the next generation of people to come in and really get to know. We do a lot of dementia training. And it's just finding staff and people who have a heart to care for people.
Man, this has been great. I really want to thank both of you so much for trying out this format, and really I want to thank everybody in the audience for the great questions and ideas to sort of advance the conversation. And I think both of you really represented your professions wonderfully. I mean, and there are aging life care managers all over the country. There are senior living providers all over the country. We got two perspectives here that you'll find similar and probably different than others out there. But I think it was enough of you provided some great insights that really helped us advance the dialogue and really validated to me that this type of format on this topic of housing is one that we should keep on playing around with. So I really want to thank both of you. I'll make sure that on the recording link that both of your contact information is right there, along with this whole chat transcript that has lots of great resources and websites in it. But again, thanks. But before I press the end button, is there anything either one of you didn't get to share in this dialogue?
I just say thanks for the opportunity, Steve, to allow Phil and I to get back together and chat with everybody.
Yeah,
I
thanks
love
for
it.
having us, Steve. We really appreciate it.
You bet. All right, folks, we'll see you at the next one.